absolutely love all the projects that this team cranks out. I'm talking about the fantasy design team, the makers of the Omni 1, which was a 3D printable storage system for your miniatures, and the Omni 2, which is a 3D printable modular carrying case for your miniatures. And today they just launched their latest project, the Omni 3, which is, you guessed it, a 3D printable modular storage system, but this time for your board games. So I'm gonna be printing all of the parts across a variety of different 3D printers, getting everything assembled and checking it out here for you today before you decide if you wanna back this project. And what I love about these Omni team projects is how unique they are, especially when it comes to things like the add-on design options or themes that are gonna be available if you decide to back the project. Now, I just have access to the standard set of files, which is what I'm gonna be building here today, but I'm for sure gonna be looking at printing one of the themed options as soon as I have access to the files, because who wants a plain vanilla option when I can have something a little bit more crazy? And when it comes to printing the files, I printed these across a variety of different 3D printers, from Prusa's to Bambu Lab machines to the Creality machines to even some of my Elegoo Neptune 3D printers. And for the most part, all of the files fit perfectly across any of these machines. In some cases, I did need to use supports on them. In a lot of cases, there weren't supports needed, or very little were needed in some of the prints. And depending on what orientation that you wanted to print them in, you could end up saving a little bit more time over printing multiple at one time. I'm also loving the potential for the different color combination options for this. I was joking around with the folks there that I kind of wanted to create a DeWalt option that's like a black and yellow, just for storing some of my tools in that actual unit. I know it's for board games, but I have ulterior motives that I want to use mine for. I also printed these all in PLA. You could, if you wanted to, make them a little bit more durable by printing them in PETG or something like that, but I just have an abundance of this black filament, so I figured why not print with that. And I also printed the accent pieces in one of my favorite filament color options, which is this Witchcraft PLA from CookieCAD. It is this bright, vibrant, sparkly purple PLA. Also, yes, I know I was printing some of these on the Bambu Lab A1, which is now the prohibited machine that you should not be 3D printing with because of a recall, but you know, I had to print with it because I was printing with it before the announcement was made, and maybe even a little bit afterwards as well. And depending on the configuration that you're going with, there are a good number of files that you're gonna need to print. And funny enough, there's some really cool ways that you can end up printing these. You are gonna, again, need some supports on a few of these areas, but the way that these are actually laid out for printing, it actually ends up saving you print time versus trying to print flat on one of the sides. Now I get to clean all these up before getting them assembled. I should also mention that all of the prints and files are labeled as well, so it's really easy to identify what you've printed versus what you haven't printed and just keep those in track. Also, all of my supports are pretty much just popping right off. And if you haven't seen my previous video that I did around my support settings that I used to get these to just kind of just peel right off, then check out the video linked in one of these corners here. This is also a great time for me to mention a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters for your continued support. If you're interested in things like the 3D printer settings that I used for my 3D prints, you can find those over in my Patreon. Honestly, I'm kind of impressed by this. That only took me 21 minutes to remove all the supports from every single one of those prints, get them cleaned up and ready for assembly here, and I even had to futz around with the camera. And here are a few tips when it comes to printing and assembling the frame for this stand. When it comes to actually printing and slicing your files, you're gonna need some supports on a handful of these files. Now, there are sections where you're gonna have these small openings where the bolts and screws are gonna go through. You wanna make sure that you do not, and I repeat, do not place supports on those openings because they are a massive pain to clear out if you end up printing them. This is gonna end up saving you a ton of time in the long run, and you do not need supports for those small overhangs. And because we have those port openings, you're gonna need some bolts and screws to actually get these things assembled and make it nice and sturdy. And what's awesome about this is that the nuts slide right into the little slot openings and make it really easy to screw those in place. They've also created detailed instructions that walk you through the assembly process step by step. And I won't lie, the assembly process takes a little while, but it's well worth it. So throw on a movie and get to screwing. Also, when I was showing you all of the printed parts, I completely forgot about this whole other set of files that I printed for this. This is the outer frame that lets it vertically go up for all of your shelves. And the pillars don't require any additional supports when printed. They also have this built-in support system that you can just pull out of them. And the stand's officially gotten too large for my workbench, so let's set it on the ground and continue with the build. And just check out how large this actually is. And just for some comparison, here's a standard box of filament inside of it so you can see the full scale and size of it. And now that we've got that assembled, it's time to start assembling some of the other accessory pieces like the handles here, which you guessed it, are gonna require some more nuts and bolts. And here's the assembled modular 3D printed board game storage system. This thing is just absolutely huge. It measures about 20 inches wide by 20 inches deep by about 36 inches tall with this, what I believe is the standard configuration. What I also think is really cool about this is that these shelves that again are 3D printable just slide right into the slot system all along the vertical spacing there. So you can print as many shelves as you potentially need for the slot openings. Now, you're not just limited to shelves, they also have drawer options as well. So if you needed some kind of a bin system to store maybe game parts or different things or paints, you can definitely print one of those as well. And since the shelves have these hexagon peg-like systems built into them, you can print off a variety of different accessories. And in this case, I printed some lift risers so that I can see some of the 3D printed models that I've decided to store inside here. And one thing that you might notice is that my acrylic doors aren't secured in place. And that's because I'm not entirely sure if I want to go with the acrylic doors or some 3D printed themed door options. These are just friction held in place within the 3D prints and are working pretty well here. However, they might occasionally fall out if I swing them too hard until I glue them in place. The same also goes for the sides and back of this storage case here. So if you wanted to put acrylic panels in or 3D print panels or make some of the custom themed panels, you have that option as well. And this is a Kickstarter campaign for a set of 3D printable files, and you typically receive those files within 1 to 2 months after the campaign ends. And what's great about it is that you end up getting an abundance of file options depending on what's unlocked throughout the campaign. I also wanted to say a big thank you to the Fantasy Design team for reaching out and sponsoring this video on the Omni 3. I'm in love with basically all of their designs and how well these are orchestrated and printed so that you can get these assembled to make these massive cases that you can 3D print. Hey, thanks so much for watching, you all, and I'll see you next time. Okay, seriously, I think I'm gonna end up printing even more of the pillars here to make an extra tall version. I wanna see if I can make like a 6 foot tall variation of this with a whole bunch of different storage shelves for, again, storing some of the different games that I have, but also some of the 3D prints so that I can showcase those off in my studio.